She watched him step onto one of the most watched dance floors in America, and she completely fell apart. Not from sadness, not from grief, but because the young man standing under those blinding ballroom lights had become someone she almost didn't recognize anymore. Terri Irwin has faced the hardest moments a person can endure, losing a husband, raising children alone, carrying a global legacy on her shoulders. But when she watched what Robert had quietly become during the 2025 season of Dancing with the Stars, something broke wide open inside her. It wasn't the transformation anyone expected. It was the one she'd prayed for. The ballroom moment. Picture this, it's dedication night on Dancing with the Stars, October 2025. Cameras everywhere, judges in their seats, millions of viewers watching live. Terri Irwin is in the audience, doing what she's done for nearly 20 years, being the rock. She's the face of the conservation brand, the keeper of the flame, the person everyone looks to when they want to talk about Steve and the legacy he left behind. She's used to being the anchor. She's used to holding everyone else up. But then the music starts and everything shifts. Robert Irwin and his professional partner Whitney Carson took to the floor to Phil Collins' ballad, "You'll Be in My Heart," and the moment became something far bigger than a dance routine. News before the performance, Robert had written on Instagram, "My mom and dad created a legacy that I'm proud to continue. I hope I can use this dance to share what she means to me, to our family, and to say thank you for always supporting me through life's ups and downs." Terri was sitting in the front row, probably expecting a beautiful routine. What she got was so much more. In the performance's final moments, Whitney stepped aside, and Terri herself walked onto the floor. Robert took her hand, and the two finished the dance together, ending in a long, tearful embrace. News. Beforehand, Terri had shared on Instagram, "I'm incredibly honored that Robert thought of me. Steve and I always talked about how much it meant to us to be parents. So much love. This will be a special night." News. She had no idea just how right she was. The judges were in tears. The audience was in tears. And Terri Irwin, one of the toughest women on the planet, was standing on a dance floor in America, completely undone by the man her son had become. That was just the beginning. On November 25, 2025, Robert Irwin was crowned the season 34 champion of Dancing with the Stars, in a finale that drew 72 million votes, double the previous year's record. San Francisco 49ers Terri's caption said everything. "Congratulations, Robert. Your passion, dedication, hard work, and kind heart got you to this point. I am so very proud of you, Robert. I know your dad is too." News. And in a separate message directed at Robert's dance partner, Terri wrote simply, "Whitney, you are now part of our family. God bless." The boy she had spent nearly 2 decades protecting from the weight of a dead hero's legacy had just stood in front of the entire world and told her she was the reason he was still standing. He wasn't just surviving, he was absolutely owning the moment. The echo of Steve. If you've ever seen a side-by-side photo of Robert Irwin and his father Steve, it's genuinely jarring. It isn't just the blonde hair or the outdoor energy, it's the way they move, the way they light up around animals, and the specific wide-eyed wonder they both carry. For a long time, the public treated Robert like a living sequel, the Crocodile Hunter 2.0, and for a kid growing up under a microscope, that is a crushing weight to carry before you've even finished high school. But Robert didn't just inherit the looks, he inherited the engine. For Terri, seeing that resemblance isn't always simple. Imagine waking up every morning and looking at your son's face and seeing the man you lost merely 20 years ago. Every laugh that sounds like his laugh. Every moment of wild enthusiasm in front of a camera that mirrors a performance you've watched 10,000 times on old recordings. The public finds it thrilling. For a grieving mother and wife, it's far more complicated. What Terri watched play out over the years, and what the whole world finally saw on that WTS stage, was the moment the echo stopped being a shadow and became a harmony. Robert wasn't just Steve's kid anymore. He had the same fire, but he was pointing it somewhere entirely his own. As Robert himself told The Hollywood Reporter after his win, doing the show taught him the strength in trust and vulnerability, saying he found power in letting go of the guard and letting emotions rise to the surface. Heart on the sleeve, take it or leave it. Tick-tock. That's not Steve Irwin's language. That's Robert Irwin's. And for Terri, hearing her son speak that was the clearest sign yet that the transformation was real. The day the world stopped. Let's go back to where this story truly begins. September 4th, 2006. If you were near a television that day, you remember exactly how it felt when the news broke. It didn't feel real. Steve Irwin was supposed to be invincible, the man who danced with apex predators, the human embodiment of fearless joy. But for an 8-year-old Bindi and a 2-year-old Robert, he wasn't a global icon or a TV superhero. He was just Dad. And then, in a freak accident, the loudest and brightest light in their universe went out. The silence that followed wasn't just quiet. It was the kind that rings in your ears for years. For Terri, the world didn't just stop, it shattered. One minute she was part of the most famous conservation partnership on the planet. The next, she was a widow with 2 toddlers and a massive wildlife park to run. The grief was public, messy, and inescapable. But behind the closed doors of Australia Zoo, Terri was facing a mountain that looked impossible to climb. Robert was only 2 years old. He has hazy, fragmented memories of his father. A scent, a sound, the feeling of being lifted high. Most of what he knows about the man comes from archives. Think about that. Your father is one of the most beloved figures in the world, but your relationship with him is filtered almost entirely through old television footage. While other kids were playing catch with their dads, Robert was watching grainy recordings of his father wrestling saltwater crocodiles, studying a ghost to find himself. Terri had a choice to make in those early years. She could have sold the zoo, moved quietly away, and let the Irwin name become a nostalgic footnote. Nobody would have blamed her. But she looked at Robert, who was already crawling toward anything that moved, and she knew the flame couldn't be allowed to go out. She was going to have to be the mother, the father, the CEO, and the guardian all at once. She was going to build a man out of the wreckage of a hero. If you want to understand how a toddler who lost his father in the most public way possible grew into a composed, world-class young man, you have to look at the woman who built the foundation beneath him. Terri Irwin didn't just cope with widowhood, she became a fortress. Consider the sheer courage it takes to wake up the morning after the most famous man in Australia dies, and realize you are now the sole CEO of a sprawling wildlife park, the mother of 2 grieving children, and the lone protector of a global legacy that everyone wants a piece of. Her war was fought on 2 fronts at once. On one side was the business. Australia Zoo was Steve's dream, a living, breathing monument that required millions of dollars to sustain. There were years of whispered rumors that without Steve's magnetic energy, the whole thing would slowly crumble. Terri stayed. She dug her heels into Queensland dirt and refused to let the dream die. She took the meetings, signed the contracts, and became the backbone of a khaki empire. On the other side was the most important job of all, raising Robert and Bindi. She shielded them in plain sight, making sure every time Robert appeared on camera, he felt like he was playing, not performing. She built a bubble of normalcy inside the chaos of a media circus. She taught him that kindness mattered more than fame, that the transformation people expected, a reckless daredevil sequel to his father, wasn't the only path. She gave him space to be quiet, to be curious, to find his own voice. And she answered the late-night questions about why Dad wasn't coming home, making sure Robert understood he didn't have to carry the world just because his last name was Irwin. By the time Robert reached his teens, the foundation was complete, solid enough that when the world turned its full attention on him, he didn't wobble. Finding the lens? The real transformation didn't begin on a dance floor. It began much earlier, in the quiet hours before dawn, with a camera in Robert's hands. For years, he had been the subject, the kid in the frame, being told where to stand and when to smile. He was a professional at being seen. But in his early teens, something shifted. He didn't want to be in front of the glass anymore. He wanted to be behind it. He picked up a camera and discovered something nobody had fully predicted. He had an extraordinary eye. Not just impressive for his age, genuinely world-class. He began winning major photography awards. He traveled from Antarctica to Africa, documenting endangered ecosystems in a way that felt sophisticated and deeply personal. This was the first moment the public started seeing Robert as a truly distinct individual. Not the legacy kid with a camera and artist. Where Steve was famous for action and volume, Robert found his power in stillness and observation. He had found a way to honor the animals his father loved, but through precision rather than adrenaline. Terri watched this shift with relief and deep pride. She saw her son trade performance for process, and when the recognition began to come, it wasn't just validation. It was a declaration of independence. Robert had his own eyes, and he saw the world differently. That quiet confidence earned in the pre-dawn silence of a wildlife hide was exactly what carried him through the glare of a primetime dance competition years later. The new era of Irwin. If photography was the quiet foundation, what came next was a full cultural earthquake. Over 2024 and 2025, Robert didn't just grow up. He leveled up into a space very few wildlife conservationists ever reach, becoming a fashion ambassador, a primetime television fixture, and the internet's favorite genuine good guy all at once. The turning point was the announcement that he would compete on Dancing with the Stars season 34. Robert told The Hollywood Reporter it had been a dream I've always known he wanted to pursue. TikTok, a lot of people were curious whether the zookeeper could really hold his own in the ballroom. The answer was an immediate yes. Robert and Whitney earned the highest score of the week in 5 out of 11 episodes, and their dedication night contemporary performance with Terri, brought onto the floor, became the most talked about moment of the entire season. First Coast News. Then came the finale. Judges praised his freestyle, calling it emotional and full of energy, and awarding it a perfect score. His overall final score was 89 out of 90. San Francisco 49ers. When the confetti fell, Robert and Whitney were crowned champions, making the Irwins the first siblings in Dancing with the Stars history to each win the Mirrorball Trophy, exactly 10 years apart. Entertainment. Backstage, Robert said the biggest word he could find was grateful. He told reporters he was there to represent his charity Wildlife Warriors, his work at Australia Zoo, and his passion for conservation, but that he had also been able to write my own legacy and tell stories of positivity and vulnerability. Through all of it, he kept coming back home. Back to the zoo, back to the animals, back to Terri. The fame was real, the ambition was growing, but the roots never shifted. The full circle. When you look back at that dedication night performance and at everything that came after, the tears Terri shed weren't just a reaction to a beautiful dance. They were the culmination of a 20-year marathon that most people would have quit at mile 5. Standing in that ballroom, watching Robert take her hand and lead her through those final moments, Terri finally saw the finish line of her most difficult mission. She hadn't just kept Steve's memory alive, she had shepherded his son through public grief, the weight of an impossible legacy, and the dangers of childhood fame, and brought him out the other side into a healthy, joyful, fully realized adulthood. That is the rarest transformation in the celebrity world, the one where the kid actually turns out okay. The fear that had lived in her since 2006 that the world would break Robert, or that the pressure of being a sequel would slowly hollow him out, finally released in that ballroom. She watched him not just win a dance competition, but win in a much deeper sense. He had become a man who could step into any arena in the world, carry himself with grace and vulnerability, and still fly home the next morning to bottle feed an orphaned kangaroo at the zoo. When asked about those dancing genes after the win, Robert laughed and said, "They pretty much didn't come from my dad. He was athletic, but no rhythm. That's got to come from Mum." Pink news, that lightness, that ability to laugh. To be a 21-year-old who cracks jokes about his late father's lack of coordination is the part of the transformation nobody talks about enough. He had made peace with the ghost, and in doing so, he had freed himself. The tragic narrative the tabloids always wanted to write never got finished, because Robert Irwin didn't become a tragedy. He became a triumph. He took everything the world threw at his family and built something out of it that his father would genuinely recognize, not as an imitation, but as a continuation. And Terri, standing in that ballroom in her yellow dress with tears on her face, already knew it. She had known it for years. She'd been building it, quietly, every single day since 2006. She didn't just survive the loss. She outlasted it, and so did he. Tragic, they said? Robert proved everyone wrong. He was transformational. Leave your comments below and subscribe to the channel for more. Thanks for watching.